Number 1. Windstorm. I live out in the northwest suburbs of Illinois. We tend to get these very nasty windstorms in November. I cannot say I know how fast the winds get, but they're pretty ferocious with the Great Lakes right there. My parents lived in a town called Wakanda. And yeah, that's a real town that is not named after the kingdom in Black Panther. Technically, we didn't live in town though. We lived out of town, in a wooded area down a hill. Most of the houses in that area have been removed due to bad flooding. So, it is a bit of a really quiet area, and actually pretty swampy too. I was home alone when this happened. I was in community college at the time, so though my family had gone to visit other family, I was unable to attend. I got up that morning to drive to school, and the wind was already howling, so I knew that it was going to be a tough day. I got out of school around 5, and driving home, I saw the effects of the fierce wind everywhere. There were shopping carts flying across the parking lots of stores, items being blown around everywhere. Hell, it was difficult to even keep the car on the road all the time, as the wind gusts would occasionally shake it. At home was no better. All sorts of debris and the many trees were swaying so forcefully that I was frightened one would crack and fall on the house. I quickly got all of my things, got out of the car, and made my way into the house. The sun had already begun to set, and I just wanted to be in the house. The wind did not ease up after it was dark. If anything, it was much louder. But the worst part was when the electricity went out. I heard a loud explosion that I could only assume had to be a transformer. Checking out the window, it was pitch black everywhere in the neighborhood. We had a generator for just such an occasion, but I had absolutely no idea how to use it. I had to settle for candles to see in the bathroom, and my 3DS was charged, so I just played with that in the dark. Our living room was set up in such a way that it faced the front door, which beyond was a little foyer. The kitchen was further into the house, and the garage was right on the left side of the backyard. You'd see the front of the garage door from the side kitchen window, and the right side of the garage from the back door to the kitchen. It is important to know this going forward. Around 10 p.m., I began to realize that I hadn't eaten anything since I got home. Our stove was gas, and thus it should still be working. I would need a candle to see into the refrigerator, though, and I went to get one out of the bathroom. I took that and lit it, putting it on the kitchen table. As I was going through the refrigerator, which was fairly close to the back door of the house, I heard a noise from the backyard. Of course, that was not to be unexpected during a windstorm. I decided to check on and see what it was anyway. I found a small flashlight in the kitchen drawer we used for tools, and went to the back window. And checking outside, I saw that the backside door to the garage was open, and it was getting whipped around by the wind. It was usually always unlocked, but it was also normally always latched. Anyway, I knew exactly what I had to do, and that was go out into the backyard and close the door. I took the small flashlight, which really did very little, and went out the back door. It was still so very windy, and I was almost knocked off my feet. That wasn't a big deal, and I walked over to the garage door and grabbed the doorknob, shutting the door. When I turned around, however, I froze, because I was looking straight at the screen door that led into the foyer, and thus the front door to the house. And I could see my candle in the living room, meaning the front door had been opened. and it was not open when I came outside. At first I thought maybe it had something to do with the wind, but that was impossible since the screen door to the foyer was closed. I was wondering if it could be air pressure or something, but then I noticed a shadow inside the house step in front of the candle and close the door. Someone was in my house. I panicked, not knowing what to do at first. I hadn't seen who it was, and I had no idea even who the intruder may have been. I didn't even know if I left the door unlocked or not. When I was able to get some of my composure, I decided the smartest thing to do was protect myself. So I went into the garage and then locked the door behind me. I went to the front of the garage and looked out, trying to see if I could catch a glimpse of the guy. I assumed that maybe he was a robber. I had my cell phone on me. This was before the time of smartphones, which is why I did not have a flashlight on my phone. So I called the police. They sent someone, but it was a bit of a wait. While I was sitting there, I began wondering what might have happened if I hadn't noticed the door open, and I had gone back into the house. While I was considering this, I heard what sounded like the front door of the house slam. And then, after a few moments of nothing but the howling of the wind, I saw a shadow looking in through the window in the garage door. The door then began to shake, and I knew it was not from the wind. It was from whoever that was trying to get the door open. But it was locked and it was solid. He stopped shaking the door and moved around a bit. I prayed that he hadn't found the side back door that I had entered through, even though I had locked it. I did not see him through the windows in the garage. However, I was tense, waiting for him to go around the garage and find the back door. But there was nothing. I also didn't see him leave, and did not know what was going on. I don't know exactly how much time passed before I saw the red and blue lights of the cop cars shining into the garage windows. I still waited until an officer did find the side door and identified myself. There wasn't a whole lot missing from the house, but also the man was not there when the cops showed up. We never found out who he was or what his motive was, other than taking a few items from the house. It was really frightening. Number 2. Thunderstorm. I always remember being told that when it comes to thunderstorms, there is nothing to be scared of. I recall all the things my parents used to tell me, including counting the seconds between seeing the lightning and hearing the thunder in order to know when the storm is moving away. But none of that really helped. I was still always very terrified of thunderstorms. When I was 11 years old, I was headed home after school one day. The entire day had been overcast, with the blackest clouds I had ever seen in my life. There was irregular lightning and thunder all day long, but the rain stayed at bay for the entire time that I was in school. I was dreading walking home, alone with the storm ready to bear down on me. But I knew it would be worse when I got home. My parents would not be home for several hours. I would have to spend the late afternoon home alone during this time period. When I had gotten closer to my house, I noticed something weird. I saw an older man talking to a kid about my age in a park that I was walking through. Suddenly, I saw an older kid named Todd that I knew went to the high school approach them, yell at the man, grab the younger kid's arm, and pull him away. I also noticed that afterward, the man looked over and noticed me as well. I did my best to ignore him, knowing that the adage of never talking to strangers was important. I got to the door, unlocked it, and went in. At that point, it still had not begun raining yet, but the thunder and lightning had continued. I was only in the house for about 10 minutes when I heard the doorbell ring. Now, normally, the rules are that I do not answer the door at all when my parents are not home. However, I was freaked out by the storm and was hoping that my best buddy Bobby had come over to play after school. Having company during the storm would have been great for me. Upon checking the door, though, I noticed it was the man who I'd seen talking to the other boy in the park. And, unfortunately, when I looked through the curtain on the door, he noticed me looking and knew I was home. "Hey, are your parents home?" he asked me. I hesitated. My parents had always told me to simply not answer the door, and thus not engage with anyone who had come along, so I wasn't prepared, and I didn't really know how to answer the question. I told him that they weren't. He had noted my hesitation. He then asked me if he could come in and wait for my father to get home from work. He explained that he knew my father and had some very important news for him. I explained I could give him the phone number for my dad's job. He could call him there. He responded by telling me that he did not have a phone on him. It looked like the rain would break outside soon, and he didn't want to get wet, so he kept insisting that I open the door and let him in. Now, being older, it may seem like common sense that I should know he was lying, but I was 11 years old and I had doubts. I told him that he would just have to wait, and I wasn't supposed to let strangers into the house. The man had an answer that might have worked on a young kid like me. He actually kneeled down, opened the mail slot on the door, and told me, "I'm not a stranger, remember? I told you that I know your dad." Right then, the scariest boom of thunder I'd ever heard exploded overhead. This caused my heart to race. I considered what the man said, and that, plus being afraid of being alone during the storm, had me considering I would like someone to be in here to protect me. "What the fuck are you doing?" I heard a voice yell. Quickly, the mail slot closed. I saw the guy standing back up, facing away from the door. Looking out the curtain, I noticed Todd was approaching the guy. Todd was a big guy who played high school football. He yelled at the man, calling him a pervert and other things that I didn't quite understand back then. He slammed the man against the door, and this caused the man to just ask to be let go. Todd pushed him down the steps. Todd knocked on the door then, and I knew him, so I let him in. He stayed there until my parents got home, and talked to them for a while. I didn't know this then, but the man was a registered sex offender who had molested some boys and spent time in jail for it. I was told this several years later. Todd had known this, and he had seen the man interacting with children. The man went back to jail immediately for breaking the terms of his release by talking to the boy in the park and myself. There are things much scarier than the storms. Number 3. Snowstorm. When I was a teenager, I spent a lot of time over at my best friend Tony's house. His family was a bit better off than mine, so he had more video games and other things to do. So it wasn't unusual of me to be over there as much as possible. The only thing we did not do were sleepovers. His parents wouldn't have minded, but my parents had something against sleepovers. Hell, to this day, I really don't know exactly why they didn't like them, but they didn't. I was over there early one day when it began snowing outside. We were in his basement, which had been set up as a recreation room. So I really wasn't sure how much it had been snowing until much later at night. When I had realized it, it was very late, and I told Tony I should probably get home before it became impossible for me to. I headed out into the snow and immediately knew this was not going to be fun. By the time I got home, my feet, at the very least, were going to be soaked. My first step into the snow had me sinking down to my ankles. However, it wasn't an unusual thing to happen to me in the winter. so I didn't think much of it. Walking home, the snow was falling hard. Whenever there was a gust of wind, it blew very swiftly into my eyes, and it would sting. I just put up with it and trudged on though, just looking forward to getting home. I heard a blood-curdling scream. At this point, I was walking alongside the road that ran alongside the park area, and the sound was coming from in the park. There was a ditch that separated the park from the shoulder of the road. I almost fell down in it from shock. When I composed myself, I looked over into the park. I heard a couple more yells, and then there was quiet. I tried to figure out where the cries had come from, but the snow was coming down too thick, and there was too little light for me to find out. But this was not the normal noise you would hear from the park. I didn't really think I could do anything helpful, and I really was scared. Still, I didn't do anything at first. I tried looking around into the park and listened again. A few moments passed and I heard nothing else. And then, I noticed a light, off deep in the park. It was a small light. It was there for a moment and blinked out. And then I noticed it come back. And then it blinked out again. After seeing it blink a few more times, I realized that the light was being held by someone who was moving closer to me. Fear took over. I was certain someone had gotten attacked in the park, but several minutes had gone by since I had heard them scream. I hadn't heard any more after the yelling that only immediately came later. I just figured that the attacker had to be the one who was coming towards me with a light. I booked home as quickly as I could. The experience was terrifying, as the snow was difficult to run through, and I had no idea if I was being followed. I didn't want to look back, and the falling snow was so thick that it wouldn't have done much good anyway. I eventually made it to my house and ran in, covered and wet with snow. I called the police and explained everything that had happened, and that someone might be hurt out in the park. A teenage girl was found unconscious and badly beaten in the park. Fortunately, they were able to find her and get her to a hospital. Her purse was emptied around her, and only her money was missing. She didn't know who had attacked her. It was reasonable to assume that if the mugger had caught up with me, it may have happened to me too. I'm not really as concerned about that as I may have been. I'm just happy I was able to get to the phone in time to call the cops to find the girl. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. Again, first thing I have to do is thank anyone who has donated to our GoFundMe for the stolen rent money. The help has been greatly appreciated, and you definitely deserve thanks again and again. And once we are caught up, I'm making it a point in the future to pay it forward, and I will donate the same amount of money to other GoFundMes and charities once we're caught up. I always think kindness is best when it leads to more kindness. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you are not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button below and the bell, or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Comment on the video and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, send it to the address in the description. But as always, please make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where the Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.